Larsa Pippen has been all over the headlines lately, and it seems that she's now caught in a love triangle between her new boyfriend, Timberwolves basketball player Malik Beasley, and his wife, Montana Yao. Apparently, Yao filed for divorce only a few days after a photo of Larsa and Malik emerged online. Here to tell us more is Kaine Fisher, Rose Law Group partner and family law director. So, Kaine, what are your thoughts?
Like Arizona, Minnesota is a no-fault divorce state, meaning you really don't have to have a basis to get divorced other than to say that there are irreconcilable differences between you two, and that can basically mean anything. It can basically mean you get up one day and you've decided you don't want to be married anymore. So Arizona and Minnesota are similar in that regard. It's no fault. So you don't, in other words, have to come into court and establish any sort of basis to get the divorce. You don't have to, like in certain fault states, you don't have to prove infidelity or domestic violence or incarceration or crimes or anything of that nature in order to get your divorce. So in situations where it's a no-fault divorce state, for the most part, infidelity and any issues like that are pretty irrelevant. They're not going to really come into play. Now, as practitioners, sometimes we find creative ways to get that information in front of a judge with the hope that it may tarnish the person's reputation, or if there's a close call, or if there's a credibility concern, that perhaps maybe that little bit of a nugget of information may have the judge wondering, is this guy a really honest guy, or is he a good person, and that sort of thing. It's kind of I guess, a practice pointer or a practice tip, but from a legal standpoint, infidelity in and of itself in states like Minnesota and Arizona is not relevant. Now, there's a kid involved here, so if the person you are having an affair with, or the person that you're now with, is a sex offender or something of that nature, and you're going to have your common minor child with around that person, then yeah, that could certainly, the relationship could have an impact on how the court decides legal decision making, parent time or custody, as it's known in other states. So it could kind of play into that in that situation. Also, in situations with waste, where you have a person spending community money, community funds, income earned during marriage, or using community assets and spending those funds on the significant other, that's certainly not a benefit to the community, and there could be some reimbursement claim there, even if those expenditures were made during the marriage, from the date of marriage to prior to the date of service. During that window there, even if those funds were used during that time, you could ask for reimbursement, which typically you can't do. It's not like I could turn around and say, oh, you spend too much money on shoes or purses or whatever, I won't reimburse for half of the money that you spend on those things during the marriage. It doesn't work that way, except for situations when it may be deemed community waste, where community funds are spent not for the benefit of the community. And strip clubs, prostitutes, significant others, those obviously are not legitimate community purposes and does nothing to serve the community. So oftentimes there'll be a reimbursement claim there. I don't, from all of the data that I've read, I haven't seen that any of that has occurred. And we know that, is it Larsa? Mm-hmm. You can assume that she's a decent person, and that's not going to be an issue in the Minnesota case. But the thing that I find probably the most important to understand about this dynamic is that when you have a spouse that's been so publicly humiliated in this way, Malik was out, at a mall in Florida, I think South Beach or wherever where Larsa lives. And I think he went to Florida State, so I think he may know people down there. But anyway, he was down there. They were out shopping, and people were taking, tabloids or whoever was taking photographs of them shopping. And then that's how Montana found out. Right. And to be so publicly humiliated like that, based on my experience and in my cases, that can tend to inflame the divorce. It can tend to make it last longer. It can tend to make somebody be a little bit less inclined to be reasonable. It can make things a little bit more expensive. And she has every right to be bitter and have animosity about the situation. But that emotion can sometimes create an impediment to a quick settlement or a cheap case. they can get, those people who have been wronged and so publicly in this case can tend to get really entrenched in their positions and want a little pound of flesh, so to
Right.
speak. I don't know if Montana is that type of person. She's a little young, so sometimes more mature people don't tend to let those emotions. But who knows? I mean, sometimes if you're married 20 years and you're mature, it's even worse because you've invested so much of your life. But sometimes the younger generations, they are
Petty. They get petty.
petty, and they let their emotions run the show a little bit more.
Okay, so that's something to consider though. If your state laws, maybe not necessarily infidelity will affect your divorce case on paper, it could draw out the process because high emotions are going to get involved. So that's a good piece of advice.
Yeah, and I would also say, if you're out there trying to prove those community waste claims, that's an expensive venture. You have to do the discovery. You have to, and usually you have to prove the waste, right? So you have to obtain financial records that establish that funds were spent. Then you have to prove that the funds were spent in the way that was not a benefit to the community. And typically, that has to be done through a deposition. So let me kind of lay it out for you. I mean, you get bank statements from Malik, and you see that he's got all of these purchases at Louis Vuitton, and Montana certainly likes Louis Vuitton. I've seen some photos of her in her Louis Vuitton.
Okay.
I don't know, maybe
We all do.
likes Louis Vuitton. I'm sure a lot of people do. But so anyway, there's purchases at Louis Vuitton, and there's Tiffany's and wherever. Yeah, that proves that he bought something, but who did he buy it for? What was the purpose, and all that? And in litigation, it's not like you can just call him up and ask him. He's not going to answer that. It's got to go through the lawyers, and the lawyer, isn't candid about it or whatever. So you have to, and you want to know going into trial whether it's waste or not. You don't want to be wasting your time. So prior to getting to a trial, you've got to get that solidified. And by doing a deposition is one way you can get the answers to the questions. So you take the bank statements, you depose Malik, and you would ask him, hey, what's this? Where is it? Where's the ring? Where's the necklace? Where's the lingerie? Where's the whatever? Where's the car? I've seen it. I've seen it all, right? I mean, where's the house? I had that where a spouse had co-signed or jointly purchased a piece of real property for during the marriage with somebody else. So where did the money come from for the down payment? And so you have to kind of lay all of that groundwork before you get to trial. Now, if you're looking at $50 here and $270 there, and it's like, does it make sense to do it? So you have to do always this cost benefit analysis with your client and say, look, I mean, in situations where you're talking about middle income bracket people or whatever, it's usually not worth it because they're spending $400 at the most on maybe dinner or some gift or whatever. Now, when you've got pro basketball players, I mean, and their exorbitant incomes, now it may be worth it to do the investigation and do a little digging because the expenditures may be upwards of over $100,000. So, yeah.